Hello, and welcome to the Scott Mize Show, a podcast focused on body and hormone optimization and improvement for anyone who's looking to get jacked, build muscle, lose fat, improve their hormones, feel better, or improve their health. Here, I interview experts in lab work, hormones, bodybuilding, coaches, bodybuilders, and everyday people and senior executives who have improved their hormones and improved their body. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Anything you hear should not be taken as medical advice. Please consult with your physician before making any changes to your diet, exercise, or supplementation protocols. This podcast is brought to you by Element Electrolytes. Element Lemonade is finally here. It's great for a hot summer day, workout, or just enjoying with a cold beverage at your desk. Check it out and get your free sample pack of their favorite flavors, along with any regular purchase when you use my custom link, which is drinklmnt.com/Scott Mize. The sample pack is great for anyone who's interested in trying their most popular flavors, or anyone who wants to introduce a friend to Element. Go to drinklmnt.com/Scott Mize to claim this awesome deal. Now on to the show. This podcast is brought to you by BioLongevity Labs for all your peptide and bioregulator needs, including retatrutide, aka GLP-3, MOTS-C, 5-amino-1-MQ, BPC-157 and TB500 for tissue and joint recovery and healing, as well as digestion, and much, much more. Head to biolongevitylabs.com and use code SCOTTM, that's Scott M, all one word, to save and support the show. Thank you. Dom Schuster is today's guest. He's an online fitness and prep coach, performance nutritionist, coaching driven men and women. He has a bachelor's of science in human performance. He's also into MMA. He's a dog dad. He uses science, skill, and sustainability to help people get the best results. And he has one of the best podcasts out there. I listen to every episode. He has fantastic guests. It's called More Than Muscle. Check it out on YouTube. Search Dom Schuster, and you'll find it. I've been on there, bring down the average, but there's been some fantastic guests. So definitely check that out. Welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you so much. It's great to have a little round three right here because you're on my podcast actually twice now, which is awesome. So it's glad to finally trade places and be the interviewee instead of the interviewer.
Yeah, I've never talked so much about hair.
Yeah, that last podcast was definitely a little different direction in terms of where I go with most of my podcasts, but I think it was definitely one of the most popular ones in terms of the feedback I got in my DMs in regards to people suffering with hair loss and stuff like that. So definitely recommend you guys give that one a watch. It was definitely filled with some information that I learned a bunch on the podcast from you two, Chris John, and you too, Scott.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really fun. You did a really good job moderating, and Chris is a great guy. I appreciated meeting him. So I'd love to just kind of start with your background, Tom. What got you into lifting in the first place? Feel free to start as early as your childhood and give us a picture of, how you slowly and gradually got to where you are today.
Absolutely, man. So first of all, I guess take it back to my childhood. I was a kid that grew up in a bunch of different countries. My dad, he was an entrepreneur. He had different jobs. He was also in the Navy early on in my childhood as well. So that kind of contributed to a bunch of my moving around, and landed up in Malaysia early on in my childhood, which is actually where my mom is from. And back there, that's kind of the start, I guess, of my fitness journey in the bad sense, because in Malaysia, there's not a lot to do. There's not a lot of culture around fitness necessarily. It's a very much so educated oriented culture. So over there, I was very much focused on schooling and video games for the most part. I was just playing Pokemon on my Nintendo DS all day. I remember getting headaches, and I remember ending up around the age of 7 pretty overweight, skinny, fat, and just not necessarily feeling my best. And that's when my family decided to move to the country of Australia. And in Australia, it's a very different culture than Malaysia because obviously it's very fitness oriented. There's a lot more health focus of a culture in Australia for sure. And over there, I started getting into things like rugby. I started getting into bike riding with my dad, tennis, a bunch of different activities. I just noticed I started to feel so much better about myself. I started to have so much more mental clarity. And I just noticed myself smiling a lot more. In Malaysia, I felt myself not necessarily being as happy of an individual. And now, obviously, this is hindsight being in my adulthood looking back on things, but in terms of kind of the story I told myself of my childhood is Malaysia was a little bit more of like a depressed sort of feeling. I think a lot of that did come down to the physical activity. And after we finished up 4 years in Australia, my dad switched jobs, moved back to Malaysia, and then I experienced that harsh switch again of going from a very fitness oriented culture to something that was a little bit more slow, a little bit more, a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Neurological, a little bit more focus on education and stuff like that, and fell back in the same trap of just being focused on video games. And that was kind of a realization moment of how important fitness is for my overall mental health. I know it differs for everybody out there, but for me personally, if I'm not a person who's active, who's moving, who's doing any of that type of stuff, I'm just going to be a person who's filled with brain fog. I'm going to be a depressed person. I'm not necessarily going to be my best. After that, moved to Texas, and I decided, hey, this is an opportunity to start new, is an opportunity to get into different things, start getting into basketball. And I had a really, really good basketball coach at the time, Coach Jay Pitt. If you guys are out there, down there in Houston, Texas, definitely search him up because he has worked with some of the best individuals out there in terms of the game, like the Harrison twins, De'Aaron Fox, a bunch of different NBA players out there. So he's definitely very, very intelligent. And he's a guy who definitely pushed me into working hard, into developing my mindset more as a man. Because my dad, like I mentioned, he was an entrepreneur. He was a guy who was not necessarily as around as much in my childhood. He was very, very focused on business. So I kind of developed, fatherhood figures outside of my immediate family in terms of looking for mentors in my school or in sports coaches or figures I would see on the internet. And Coach Jay was definitely the person who pushed me into, a little bit more of a hardworking mindset and developing me as a man. He was the first person who told me, "Hey, Tom, you're 5'7" and you're 135 pounds in high school. You need to start getting in there and lifting some weight." So I picked up my friend Georgie from high school, and both me and him decided to go hit the weight room at Lifetime Fitness, and that was my first experience lifting weights. And I remember going in, feeling incredibly sore, and then the next day leaving and never coming back for another 2 years because I was like, man, I'm so sore. I can't dribble the ball. I can't shoot the ball correctly. It was just completely messing up my basketball game, even though it probably would have helped in hindsight. In that moment, I was very emotional in my decision making and just decided, hey, this weightlifting stuff, I'm going to put it off to this side and just focus on basketball and stuff like that. Eventually got to the age of 16 years old, had a DVT blood clot in my left leg. And at that point, I was no longer able to play physical sports or basketball at that time, at least advised by my doctor. I was put on blood thinners, Xarelto, which is a more modern blood thinner, so it comes with a little bit less side effects than some of the older ones like warfarin and things of that nature. With that, I also had to have surgery because it was one of the biggest blood clots that the doctor has ever seen in their life. It ranged from my ankle all the way up to my groin. So basically, I guess to get to how it kind of manifested to that point, basically went to a doctor, got their first opinion. They basically told me it was like a IT band syndrome, which is weird because like it was on the inside of my leg where my adductor was, where the pain and stiffness was, and the IT band is obviously on the lateral part of your leg on the outside. So that was very poor advice on that doctor's and they gave me a bunch of stretches to do, which is something you definitely should not be doing with a blood clot. And they told me to foam roll, which is definitely something you should not do with a blood clot in your system. So actually very fortunate that, nothing broke off during that 3 month period, but it just progressively got worse and worse to the point where I couldn't walk. So I had to go in, get it checked out, got the ultrasound, and they ended up doing like a very experimental surgery to where they stuck a tube in the back of my leg, basically, and they kind of sucked out the blood clot through this tube. And it's they're doing it more often now, but I was one of the first individuals, at least one of the first pediatric patients, to actually go through that procedure. And that was like a 7 day process. So 7 days under anesthesia, come back, wake up, eat a meal, and then just get knocked out, the next morning. So it was just like a extremely stressful process. And at the end of that, I went from being 5'7", 135 pounds to 5'7", 105 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, and I basically looked like I came out of a camp in Germany. Let's put it that way. Like I was very, very skinny, very underweight, and I was basically told I couldn't do physical activity for like an entire year. So for an entire year, 17 years old, being that underweight, feeling embarrassed about myself, I the only thing I really could do was go to the bookstore with my dad a couple times. I came across Arnold's Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding, and that's where the entire bodybuilding journey took off. From there, I just became completely infatuated with the physiques. I would be in my room, even though I was told I couldn't do physical activity. I would just be doing push-ups and sit-ups and stuff like that, and just being completely inspired and in love with it. I started looking up YouTube videos. Guys like Matt Ogus come to mind. Guys like Elliot Hulse, Omar Isuf, some of the OG YouTubers back in like the mid 2010 kind of era. That's really kind of what got me inspired in terms of my fitness journey. So once I was cleared, able to go back, first thing I did was go to the gym. That was literally the first thing I could think of doing as soon as I got cleared. And by that point, I was just absolutely in love with bodybuilding, in love with fitness. And from that point onwards, I decided to make it kind of like a big part of my life. I decided to go to college, went to University of Tampa for it, got a 4-year degree. While I was in college, I coached a couple of my friends who were, just interested in fitness. They saw my own transformation because I went from 105 pounds when I started lifting weights to 185 pounds in a year, which was very, very good. And that was 100% natural. It didn't do any supplements or anything like that. And it came on pretty clean. So that was the point where I was like, hey, I have pretty decent genetics for this. Other people saw my transformation. They got interested in it. So I decided to help a few people out, wrote some meal plans from the cafeteria at my university, some workout programs. I remember my first actual client was my roommate's girlfriend, Tasia, at the time. And I was absolutely in love with this girl before they started dating. And she hit me up and she was like, hey, I want a workout program, want to grow my glutes a little bit, blah, blah, blah. So helped her out with that program. And that was my first actual client at the time. From there, she recommended a few of her friends to me. I helped write them a few workout programs, and from that point onwards, started charging people for it. And I was able to graduate college with like a decent amount of working clientele at that time. So that's pretty much what got me up until that point. Now I'm a full-time coach. I've done a bodybuilding show myself as well, and that's pretty much what got me right here.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing all that. I
Absolutely.
had no idea. That's a crazy story, and
Appreciate that.
very
Yeah.
impressed by your resilience and resourcefulness. Um,
Thank you.
what was like some of your mental self talk like during those times of having the blood clot and feeling like you couldn't do anything, getting conflicting advice from medical professionals, like what got you through that? What were you kind of thinking to yourself or saying to yourself?
Man, I remember a very, very distinct moment in my mind that is absolutely a defining moment in my life, honestly. I remember sitting in the bed, and this was after 3 or 4 days of going through like just surgery after surgery after surgery, just feeling horrible about myself, and just I remember like throwing up and just feeling awful. And like there was one point where I threw up on myself, and I was like, I looked at my mom who was like sitting right next to me, and I was like, at this point, I honestly rather just pull the trigger. Like I told her that because I was just like, I can't imagine living like another day like this. And in that moment, I remember looking down because my favorite basketball player of all time, because I was very into basketball at that time, was Kobe Bryant. And I remember looking down, and my sister, she got me a present while I was in the hospital, and it was a magazine of Kobe Bryant, and it was signed by him. And I remember I was like, what would Kobe think of me in this moment? And what's funny is that was a sentiment that really got me through that time. And it's also something that I still kind of bring to myself today whenever I come to some of those moments where I'm feeling myself being in an extreme victim mindset of like, woe is me. I think, what would Kobe do? What would my idol do? And then eventually that transformed into, what would my highest self do?
Mm.
So I think that self talk back then, of looking at an idol, kind of gave me a perspective of looking at myself as an individual and looking at the disparity of where I am currently versus who I want to be, and then looking at the actions that need to bridge that gap. And I think that's been a humongous theme of what has made me successful in my life, is just being able to have that sort of self-reflection. And in that moment, I remember that feeling of motivation of being like, hey, I'm going to get through this. Kobe has gone through Achilles injury at that time. I'm going to get through this blood clot at this time. I just remember using his recovery from that Achilles and like his documentation of that journey as kind of motivation. So it was very externally motivated for sure, but that external motivation and the self-talk at that time kind of laid the groundwork for a positive internal motivation later down the line. So, in a brief moment, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question. Obviously, there's highs and lows that come with any sort of surgery. So, obviously, there's good moments, bad moments. There's moments of despair. But for a very defining moment in my life, I could definitely say that was one of them for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, Mamba mentality.
Yeah, exactly.
Very
Exactly. I actually have a tattoo right behind my ear of a snake in the number 8 for
oh,
Kobe right there.
very
So,
cool. Very cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. My one tattoo right now is a phoenix, which represents kind of rebirth and resilience and being able
I
to
love that.
come back from challenges and struggles. So I can definitely relate to a lot of what you're talking about, and
That's
I think it's
awesome.
great to have someone you look up to and say, what would they do? I think that can be so powerful, especially when you're not yet at the point when you're like uh, confident enough to say, what would my best self do? To your point, I think it's really good to have someone you look up to and think about, how you can embody um, the best parts of them.
Exactly. It's like fake it till you make it almost, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And then talk about how you got into bodybuilding and like competing for the first time. How did that evolve?
Absolutely. So I got into bodybuilding, like I said, when I was, reading that
Yeah,
Arnold's Encyclopedia, and from that point onwards, I still lifted weights. I went through college, lifted weights, lived kind of like the bro bodybuilding lifestyle, where I would go to the gym, and then me and my buddy would just go to the calf and pound a crap ton of like just junk food. And freshman 15 turned into freshman like 35 at that point, because we definitely put on some size for sure. After I graduated, I was, like I said, working as a coach, but I didn't have the clientele at the time to be full time. So I was still carrying on my college job, which was working at the front desk at MI40 Gym.
hmm,
And this was, at Ben Pekulski's gym down here in
yeah.
Tampa. I still go to it today,
What a
and
cool
that's where.
college job.
Oh yeah, I know. That was literally, I got to thank my buddy Zach who worked there at the time, because this was one of my dream jobs, honestly, was working at MI40, because Generation Iron at the time when I first started getting into bodybuilding was a humongous movie, and it was one of the first things on bodybuilding I actually watched, and Ben Pekulski was a main character in that, and like his whole science-based approach and doing stuff in the lab and University of Tampa. That's what made me actually move to Tampa in the first place, was that movie Generation Iron, and seeing
Cool.
what they're doing with the bodybuilding space. So that's actually what inspired me, got me through the door. I saw a bunch of bodybuilders in the gym. I saw my own physique, and I was like, "There's no fucking way, like I'll be able to do this." But then my buddy Alex Toplin, who's a men's physique competitor, he owns Men's Physique Radio right now. He's a pretty popular fitness influencer. He moved to
Yeah.
Tampa at the time, and I was one of the first people he met. one of his first friends down here in Tampa. Me and my buddy Zach, we developed a good connection with him. He looked at my physique. He was like, "Hey, you have good shape, whatever. I could tell you're super into bodybuilding. Why not do this show?" So we decided to do Summer Shredding 2021, and that was my first ever bodybuilding show. And that was my first ever cycle. It was my first ever time competing. I was into bodybuilding. I was into the culture, but I didn't necessarily know, all the things that bodybuilding prep or all the things it would entail. I was very naive in terms of the aspect of the X's and O's of bodybuilding preps, but I was, very knowledgeable in terms of the nutrition side of things and training side of things. I just didn't necessarily know what it took to get to stage condition. So I just listened to pretty much everything he told me to do and made probably like the second coming of like my craziest transformation where I gained 80 pounds. I stayed 185. Well, I gained 80 pounds in high school, 100% natural. This time I was like 185 pounds my entire prep, and that did not move at all. But
Wow.
my physique literally looked like I gained like 18 pounds of like pure tissue during that time, and it was
It's crazy.
absolutely insane. I was like, it was the first time where I was like, I at the time I didn't believe you could build muscle and lose fat at the same time because I was natural, obviously. But then I was like, nope, I think performance enhancing drugs change that equation a little bit. So I was able to, go through with that prep, and it taught me so much about myself. I remember so many times where I was doing 2 hours of cardio. We push because 16 weeks going from a person who's never competed before to, followed a meal plan for the most part to going straight into a contest prep like that. We definitely had to push in regards to the work we were doing in cardio and training and stuff like that. So that was probably the hardest I ever worked. I came out of it with like a feeling of accomplishment, but I also came out of it with like a feeling of motivation of like, hey, I want to do better at this. I want to be better at this. I want to,
Cool.
make this kind of my thing. I want to, make this part of who I am, part of my identity. I want to be a bodybuilder for the rest of my life, and that's kind of that's kind of my whole first prep story right there,
Yeah.
in a nutshell.
Very cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And
Absolutely.
I guess you've evolved a lot since then. And I want to talk about subsequent shows in a minute. But one thing that I found really interesting about you, and I think why a lot of people are attracted to you and the podcast, um, is you're more than just a bodybuilder. Like you have a lot of different interests. You have different hats you wear. Can you talk about how you think about that and um, sort of expanding your identity beyond just being a bodybuilder?
100%, 100%. So I think that starts from making that actually starts from making that mistake of, hey, I want to be a bodybuilder and have this be part of my identity. Because I think us as physique athletes, us as athletes in general, always make our sport a part of our identity. It's very hard not to, especially when it's a 24-hour sport when you have to make so many sacrifices, and you sort of get labeled from the outside world, especially from people who weren't familiar with you prior to or were familiar with you prior to you starting bodybuilding, and then they see you now. They kind of draw this, distinction of, hey, Tom's a bodybuilder now, and then you sort of identify with that, and then you make that your whole identity. And I think that's where I see a lot of people make a mistake, and that's where I made a mistake of making bodybuilding my entire identity. Everything I would wear would be gasp clothes. Everything I would watch on TV would be bodybuilding podcasts. I would just literally be 100% obsessed. 100% of my day would be 100% bodybuilding. And eventually, it's a great feeling. I think a lot of people could use a little bit more of that immersion into the sport, especially nowadays,
Hmm.
where I feel like a lot of people do things for social media. I think being immersed in the sport fully for the reasons. For the right reasons of being in love with it and just being completely obsessed with it, I think it's a great feeling. I think it's something that everybody should at least experience. But moving out from that, I think you should also expand your horizons a little bit. I see a lot of bodybuilders getting caught in the trap of physique posting all the time, and I see this. And the reason I say it's a trap is because now when you want to post something else that's not your physique, you don't get as much engagement.
Yeah.
People aren't as interested. If you see, I see so many people in the gym just like this who just constantly post their physique, and then they come up to me and they're telling me, "Hey, how do you post educational content and get people through the door, get sales or whatever?" And it's like, because people follow me for that reason. It's people follow me for things outside of my actual physique, because it's something that I've constantly been posting. It's something you can't get too caught up in the trap of just posting your physique for the algorithm. If you look back on my page, you will see perhaps if you scroll down, the first 100 posts may be my physique. But then from that point onwards, you will only catch a handful. And that transition was me understanding that I'm getting burnt out by the sport. I'm getting burnt out by being a bodybuilder all the time. There's so much more to life than just simply bodybuilding, which is very hard for me to even kind of say now. It feels weird for me to say that, because I'm very much a person who's enamored by work ethic, enamored by obsession. Kobe Bryant obviously made his entire identity work ethic with basketball. But then I also have to understand that's Kobe Bryant. That's not Tom Schuster. Tom Schuster doesn't have to be Tom Schuster, the bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Tom Schuster could be Tom Schuster who loves bodybuilding, but also loves certain animes, who also loves taking his dog on long walks, who also loves reading books about philosophy and spirituality and things of that nature. I think a lot of times when we solely identify as being a bodybuilder and we make a lot of our actions throughout the day simply surrounded by bodybuilding, and we make that our main focus on our mind, we can miss out on so much more of our potential of who we can actually be in terms of what we can contribute to society as a whole. And I think, if we as a bodybuilding community kind of come to that realization of, hey, expand outside of the sport, we would have a lot of less people leaving the sport with mental health issues, and we would have a lot more of a positive light on the sport. And now we're starting to see that across the board. Guys like Jordan Hutchinson, he comes on a podcast talking about his balance with bodybuilding and how that kind of contributed to his previous placings this past year. See so many guys talk about the mental aspect of doing things outside of bodybuilding. Ian, Fuad, they're all on the Bro Chat podcast talking about how they wish when they were bodybuilding they disconnected a little bit more and did things a little bit more outside of just simply focus on living in your bubble. And I think that's something that a lot of people could definitely benefit from doing, is just finding practices, habits, and things that take you outside of bodybuilding. And I think that it sounds counterintuitive, but it's actually going to benefit you as a whole.
Yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. And I can totally relate to being on that end of the spectrum before. Especially in prep, I found myself very deep on that end of the spectrum. I've never been a one-dimensional person, just due to, partly due to the fact that I've never really made money off the fitness industry. So, I have to have a quote-unquote real job, corporate job, so I can't be one-dimensional, otherwise I'd be unemployed. But I'd say, I have a lot of diverse interests, whether it's video games or my dogs or friends or food or the podcast, my job, my wife, traveling. But I'd say I've found myself in the trap of my time and energy being so focused on bodybuilding. So it's never that I don't have other things going on. It's that the dedication of those resources is too concentrated in bodybuilding. And I think that's where I can get into a worse mental state. I know. And it can start to affect my relationship with my wife if all my energy is going into bodybuilding, which it kind of has to be in a prep. And that's what I realized this year, and why I'm not going to be competing anymore, is because I really, it's unfair to her. I get 98% of the enjoyment of bodybuilding from everything but competing. And I get that last 2 to 5% of happiness from actually competing and stepping on the stage, but at 2,000% more cost. in terms of, how it affects my wife and how it affects the rest of my life. And that's not a worthwhile trade-off to me. I don't regret anything. I had a great time competing. I guess I do regret how I didn't meet her emotional needs as much in this prep. Just, not being emotionally available, which really isn't fair to her. But I am very conscious of that, and I've made the decision that I'm going to be a bodybuilder, but I'm going to do everything except stepping on stage, and I think that's going to make me a lot happier and healthier, and work in favor of my relationship and my career as well.
100%. I think the point you touched on right there in terms of cost of trade-off in terms of enjoyment versus the process is a conversation that I have a lot with my clients, especially first-time competitors, because everybody comes through your door with like different personalities, but for the most part, you can kind of see the people who are very, very much in the same position that maybe you and I were a couple of years ago, where we were very, very much enamored, obsessed with the sport and things of that nature. And sometimes you can kind of see certain aspects of that take away from their enjoyment, or you can kind of see that things are starting to stress them out a little bit more than they should. A conversation that I love to have with some of those people is the cost to benefit analysis in terms of the actions that go into bodybuilding. Okay, well, if you're 100% on point right now, but you're sacrificing 50% of your enjoyment being 100% on point, what if you're 95% on point, but you got 75% of the enjoyment? Okay, what if you're 90% on point, but you got 100% of the enjoyment? Is that a trade-off that you're willing to make? Okay, well, is that, we understand that obviously maybe some results may be traded off with that, but for the long term, bodybuilding's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Is this going to be a decision that's going to help keep you in the sport long term? Because that's going to make you do better. That's going to make you turn pro. You're more likely going to turn pro 7 years doing the sport than if you're trying to sprint doing it 5 years. So it's kind of like that rationalization of like, okay, well, if we kind of rationalize the cost to benefit trade-off of the things that you enjoy about bodybuilding and the things that are just added stressors but only maybe give you 2% of the additional gains or fat loss or whatever, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it? And for a lot of people, you're not going to make a career out of bodybuilding. This is purely a hobby. Why are you doing it if you don't enjoy it? And that's kind of a conversation I love to have with some individuals, because you see the perspective change from that point forward. And then you can just kind of see how people approach the sport with a lot more positivity after that.
Yeah, I love that. And I can tell your own experiences and how much you care about your clients and how much you care about learning has really made you a fantastic coach.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's so much more valuable than just providing a meal plan or macros and training split, to actually like care enough about your clients to have those conversations. I think that's really really impressive.
Absolutely. I think that's I never want to be a therapist. That's never my position. Obviously, I've always put things into scope of practice of what I'm willing to help with versus what may need a referral to somebody else who's dealing with some more issues. But wherever it comes to like some not low level, but I guess things that aren't necessarily as big of mental health concerns and just sort of life concerns or approach to the sport concerns or mentality concerns, I think that's something a lot of coaches don't necessarily capitalize on it. I think that's something that could definitely benefit your clients a lot more if you just take that 5 extra minutes to just send that message and just it doesn't really take too much time out of your day. For sure, it can get emotionally draining at times if you're having those conversations all the time, but that's the job you signed up for, and I'm very happy to put myself in that position if it means if I'm 5 minutes of emotionally drained or perhaps stress, figuring out the right way of like wording this text to this person to get things to click. If it's going to make their enjoyment for the journey for years to come a lot, better. Not to say that I have that impact or, make myself, build myself up to some guru or anything like that. But if I'm able to at least have some impact on that person's enjoyment, I'm happy to do so, because I think that's what we all should be doing in the sport, is like learning from our mistakes and then passing it forward to the next generation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I think you're selling yourself short. I'm sure you do have that impact. And speaking of coaching, what do you enjoy most about coaching, and what types of individuals do you work with?
Absolutely. So right now, my clientele is across the board right now. It's all over the place. I have, a 50-year-old mom who's dealing with like severe acne that I'm helping her out with the case, and I also have like 18-year-old bodybuilders who are just trying to get into the sport for the first time. So really across the board, I do work with like a vast majority of people. I haven't necessarily found a quote unquote niche or anything like that. I just love to quote myself as like, my niche is problem solving. If you come to me, I'm going to dedicate 100% of my resources to helping solve your problem, no matter what it is, within obviously scope of practice and within my knowledge. But in regards to what I enjoy most about coaching, man, there's so much. It's probably easier to answer what I don't enjoy about coaching, because that list is probably a lot shorter. But I love the individuals I get to work with. I love the stories I get to hear in regards to people coming through my door. I'm very fortunate. I know a lot of coaches out there perhaps complain about their clientele or things of that nature. But for me, for the most part, I have had some incredible people come through my door that have taught me a lot, yeah, as a person as well. So I'm very one of the things I enjoy most is just that human connection, because I think that's something that gets missed a lot, especially in society, especially in bodybuilding, where we're very isolated. Whenever we can have some more deeper connections with some individuals, get to learn their story, get to learn how they tick as well, and develop that relationship long term, that's very fulfilling for me. So for the first and foremost is developing connections and relationships with my clientele. Second, I would definitely love to say it's that feeling of when, yeah, okay, so I don't know how many people you've coached, but that sort of experience where you get somebody through your door and then they're maybe doing a movement, like let's just say for example like a lateral raise, and they've been doing it wrong for months and months and months, and like you've given them critiques over and over, and then they send you a video and they're like, am I doing it? Am I doing the thing? You're like, yeah, you're doing the thing. It's like that feeling of like, okay, well, we got somewhere. We made progress. I was able to actually help this individual. That's a very like rewarding feeling for me. It's like satisfying almost. I don't know if that's like autism or whatever, but it's very satisfying to get that feeling of like helping somebody out to that degree for sure.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say, those are the two up, first and foremost. Obviously, winning is a humongous thing. Whatever a client's goal is, whenever you're able to, help them reach their Super Bowl, whether it's like a wedding, whether it's a show date, whatever it is, when you actually get to that goal and you're able to say, objectively that you're able to accomplish it, and, a person who may have experienced not winning too much in their life, or, being on a crappy basketball team and just losing all the time, or whatever, back in high school, you get them to have one of their first wins, and you see their confidence develop from that point forward. That's a really, really, really good feeling as well. So I would say, if I had to name a top three right there, those are top three for sure.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I really enjoy that, and yeah, that's definitely the aspect of coaching I love the most, is just seeing people like surprise themselves with what they were able to achieve. It's really
Exactly.
awesome. And then another thing I wanted to ask is, in your coaching, I'm sure you have, but maybe you can think of an example of when a client came to you with a problem, like maybe it's functional health, maybe it's a gut thing, or maybe it's a certain organ thing, and you had to learn to help them. Can you talk about like just, you don't have to get into any specifics, but just kind of the area, and did you enjoy that, being able to like learn and then apply and solve someone's problem?
100%, man. So, I guess the first one that kind of comes to mind is a case I had. Client Christina, she's no longer with me because we got her to her wedding, and she's very happy and in a good position. But she was my client for over 2 years, kind of working towards this wedding date with her husband, who worked with me as well. And they're very good people. Love them. Hopefully, I'll send them a clip from this podcast so they can see this. But she came to me with very bad gut issues, very, very bad. And she went through a couple different naturopaths in regards to helping her solve the problem in the past. And it just was something that, constantly reoccurred. She was telling me some of the stuff that they were doing, and I was like, this sounds a little bit off. So I decided to contact somebody who I knew and very much respected in the industry, Austin Stout. And I decided to just take him on for like a consult call. And I was very impressed with the knowledge he was able to share with me during that consult call. I was very impressed with the results that I was able to, get the client in regards to helping her resolve some GI issues with some very low hanging fruit in regards to digestive supplementation and just some, food removals that I was not necessarily aware of at the time. But just by doing that and seeing how much she improved, I was like, okay, well, I know that there's going to be plenty more people coming through my door with a gut issue. I don't want to always have to refer to somebody else for it, especially if it's something that's a little bit low grade and something that's a little bit easier to solve. So I just told him, I was like, hey, Austin, I want to sign up for a mentorship for an entire year, just going over the gut, GI maps, Dutch tests, everything in regards to gut health as a whole. So definitely that was the first mentorship I ever invested in. And that's been one of the most useful in terms of my coaching, because ever since then, a lot more people have come through my door in regards to, not even bodybuilders, but just people in general. I think gut health is an epidemic in the United States right now. And I think a lot of people are dealing with a lot of gut issues, and a lot of people don't even know what good digestion is because they've never had it in their entire life. So that's definitely been a useful mentorship for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. Like, sometimes I think about just like walking down the street, thinking about how the average person eats, like non-bodybuilders, and I'm like, how do these people not all have constant gut issues? And then I'm like, actually, they probably do. It's just not talked about at all.
Yeah.
Like it's probably so common, and I'm sure you've seen it all over the place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I've seen it with my own dad, dude. Like my
yeah,
dad, he's just had like horrible digestion for years, and like I never thought twice about it. Even when we were in like high school and stuff, he would have a meal and just like feel awful afterwards, and just be like on the couch falling asleep after eating like a salad or something like that. And I was like,
yeah.
man, that's not normal. So I've been able to kind of help him out a little
Oh,
bit
cool.
too in regards to some gut health stuff in regards to that. But he had no idea. He thought it was completely 100% normal
Wow.
for him to eat a meal and just feel super tired, even though he's looking around at everyone else feeling kind of normal after eating meals.
Yeah,
But yeah, even to that degree, I think a lot of people don't have that self-awareness for sure.
yeah. Shifting back to your own bodybuilding journey, and that first show, what were some mistakes you made personally, and what are like common mistakes you see in first time competitors?
So honestly, I think my first prep went very well. There weren't too many mistakes that I necessarily made, because I did exactly what I would recommend a lot of people to do, to just trust your coach, not overthink things, and just simply be immersed in the process. And that's something that I definitely did. Now, even Alex would admit that some of the things that we may have done were a little bit experimental at the time, because he took me on as one of his friends. I was a free client, so part of the deal of me being a free client was that I was one of his first classic physique competitors. So he got to experiment in regards to training protocols, diet protocols, PED protocols, and things of that nature. So perhaps would say maybe for some first time competitors, not go with such a experimental approach, and perhaps go with like a little bit more of a tried and true approach for sure. But for me, I can honestly say I don't necessarily regret anything, or can't think of like a big mistake that I made my first prep. I will say that a mistake a lot of first time competitors make their first prep is not necessarily picking the right coach. I think that's something you hear very often, especially when people are at the top of the sport. A lot of people do complain about, yeah, I hear Martin Fitzwater and like a bunch of people being like, hey, my first coach, he did this and this and this, and it wasn't great. And I decided to move to this coach, and like things just took off from that point. I think a lot of people don't, because they don't necessarily have the knowledge of the industry as much, they're not necessarily able to discern perhaps who's a helpful coach versus a coach who's a little bit more in it for financial incentives. So I think I would say do your own due diligence in terms of looking at a person's resume, and talking to their clients as well, talking to their past clients, not just their current clients, and really, really doing your research before hiring a coach. I think that's something that a lot of people make a mistake on doing, and I think it's an integral part of the process because they're obviously going to be kind of your guide along this journey, especially when you're a first-time competitor. You have no idea what to expect or any of the things that kind of go into bodybuilding as well. The second thing I would say is definitely do your own research as well. Don't just rely on somebody's sole advice. I would say, like, definitely whenever you get something put into your protocol or whatever, just ask why. And just kind of do a little bit digging because, like I said, trust your coach for sure and trust what he has to say, but also at the same time, do your own due diligence and just double check and make sure that this is a right decision for you, because sometimes coaches don't know drug interactions, things of that nature. They can put something on your plan and it's like you forgot to tell them you're on a certain medication. Maybe they put methylene blue on your plan or something like that. You forget to tell them you're on SSRIs, and that could just be a very bad case of serotonin syndrome right there. So it's just double checking and just making sure you do your own due diligence, especially when it comes to safety concerns and things of that nature. But for the most part, I think that if you just trust the process, trust your coach, immerse yourself in the process, and truly do it for enjoyment and not simply for social media. And just maybe your first prep, you turn off your phone, you turn off social media, maybe just go ghost mode for a little bit and just simply just do it to simply just live in the day in, day out. I think that could be, nobody's going to take that advice, but I think it'll be beneficial advice for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I have made fun of bodybuilders in the past for blindly trusting their coach when, like, at the end of the day, it's your body. Like, it's your life. It's your responsibility to know what you're doing, and you have the ultimate decision on what you do. Everything your coach says is suggestion. Like, they're not a god. So they make mistakes. They may not know everything that's going on, to your point, and I think you have to take ultimate responsibility, extreme ownership, if you will. But yeah, I think there's a balance between not doing what your coach says and making your own decisions and completely neglecting them and not following the plan and blindly trusting them like a robot. And so many bodybuilders wear this badge of honor, like, oh, I do no matter what my coach says, I do what they tell me to. I'm like, you're stupid. You lack independent thought. So, like, that's not something to be proud of. But,
it's no different than being like, not to get into political or anything like that, but, whichever political party you're a part of, being like, no matter what, I agree with like every single, political, whatchamacallit, topic that this political party says their statement on. I'm gonna 100% be convinced and 100% dive in. It's like there's so much room for nuance in regards to how you apply things to your own individual life, your psychology, your morals, your values, all those different things. You should definitely take that into account and be your own individual versus just being a blank slate. I think that's again comes into the topic that we were talking about earlier about being more than just muscle, being an independent thinker as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love it. And so talk about where you went from there. Like, after your first show, you felt like you were all in on bodybuilding. What happened next, and where did you go from there?
It's actually a really good transition because actually what got me into bodybuilding coaching was me doing my own research during prep because I trusted my coach fully, but I did exactly what I said. Anything he put on my protocol, I made sure I went on, did YouTube videos. I watched a bunch of different fitness influencers and stuff like that, and then eventually it got it more deep into, okay, what does the science actually say behind this? Okay, John Jewett's putting out at university. Why don't I sign up for this? And then it just became from my own self-interest of learning about myself. I got right. Well, I guess to preface this, I finished that prep. I got a client who was very interested in competing himself, and then I was like, I want to learn also more about this, not only for my own bodybuilding journey, and I want to learn about this so I can help this guy out as well. So that's where I started investing into mentorships, Dom Kuza's classes, things of that nature. And I really dove into more of like the bodybuilding side of health and fitness versus just simple health, fitness, functional health, and things of that nature. So that's really my own research for my own selfish reasons on bodybuilding prep that got me into kind of more the coaching aspect side of things as well, and researching not only for my own bodybuilding journey, but to develop eventually a prep coaching business.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. And you competed again, right? Or
oh, yeah, absolutely. So I didn't actually, step on stage. So this is a little bit of a short story, long story, but I'll be a master of brevity right here. But in terms of that, after that first show, I took a 3-year off season because I was like, next time I step on stage, I want to be, I want to look like I belong up there. I want to do nationals and do really well and be very competitive. So took 3 years off, and I treated that 3 years literally like a bodybuilding prep. There are 6-month stretches where I went without, having a meal off my plan or a gram off my plan. I was very much, trapped in my little bubble in regards to that. And, that's kind of what got me to the point of, hiring Mike Nassif, who's one of my good friends, probably one of the best coaches out there for my first prep. And we went on earlier that year, last year, 2024. I signed up with him around that December 2023 or January 2024 time, and we did like a little bit of a push phase leading into a prep. And after that push phase, I developed some gut issues, and it was already things that were kind of manifested a little bit from the past. So I used some of my knowledge from Austin Stout, and also Mike's very knowledgeable in regards to GI issues as well. So he was able to help me out. After we went through a 16-week whole gut protocol right after that push phase, it was very extensive. It was very hard. I had to cut out all artificial sweeteners, all garlic, all bunch of very limited diet for 16 weeks because my GI map results were pretty messed up. So we had to do some pretty severe stuff to kind of get that get the ball rolling in regards to that. Now, after I got my GI map results back, after we did the protocol, things looked fairly cleared up. I was still dealing with minor constipation and things of that nature. Still decided to push through with the prep, which in hindsight was a little bit rushed and perhaps a little bit of a mistake. I think we both, me and Mike, after that prep process, kind of came to terms with perhaps waiting a little bit longer after that gut protocol and just making sure that things were 100% before diving into that prep would have been a little bit smart. But me and him were very trigger happy because he saw my physique in person for the first time right after that push phase before that gut protocol. And anybody knows Mike knows that he's not a coach that compliments anybody. But I was standing there with my buddy Derek Lindsay in his garage posing for him when he lived down here in Tampa at the time. And he looked at me and he was like, "Tom, you can win nationals the way you look right now." Yeah, I was never a person who looked at my physique that way. But that gave me so much fucking confidence hearing him because I knew he wasn't bullshitting me.
Yeah.
I was looking at his friend right next to me. And like I said, I was a person who stayed very covered up during that time, didn't post my physique too much. He only saw me in checking pictures. He never saw me actually pose in person. And that was the first time. And he was like, "Man, you look absolutely crazy." So I think seeing that image, and what that could have manifested to on stage, I think that made us very trigger happy at the time to just kind of go along with the prep process and be very eager to just kind of pull off that package on stage. Halfway through the prep, I was pulling down, but there's like this lower ab distension that just would not go away. And it was very prevalent in my side poses, especially my side relaxed. Anytime I would twist, I would have this thing kind of stick out. And it was very weird. And we were thinking, is it hernia or is it what it was? We just could not figure it out during that time. And we just kept pulling down, pulling down. It eventually got to the point where I was 1 week out from my first show that season. It was essentially going to be, kind of my qualification for nationals. And I looked at Mike and I was like, I know that, if we brought the level of conditioning right here and this package right now, without the distension, we're going to win the show. And he's like, I agree. But with that distension, you may not be first call outs. That's just the fact of the matter. So decided to pull out. It was, a very hard decision, but I knew even stepping on stage and seeing my physique and not being happy with that would have been a little bit more mentally damaging, especially, treating a 3 years off season, literally like a prep, making so many sacrifices going into that show. It was very hard. It was a very hard decision. And it was something that left me very lost at the time because I was like, there is a problem right here that I felt like we've done everything up until this point to solve, and it's just not going away. So that's when I decided to transition from bodybuilding briefly into MMA. And that's where I was just kind of done with bodybuilding. I was like, fuck this, blah, blah, blah. I'm done with this shit. I'm not going to compete. I'm just going to be a coach and just coach people on the side. So kind of left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth after that for sure. But then after taking a break from bodybuilding, going into MMA, doing jiu-jitsu, doing Muay Thai, and doing a lot of self-discovery during that time period, because obviously, like I mentioned, bodybuilding being a humongous part of my life, treating it like that, again, bring it back to the identity conversation, that's kind of where I developed that mindset of, being a little bit more than just a bodybuilder, of like looking at, other aspects of my life, developing that quote unquote life balance. Obviously being a bodybuilder, perceived balance from the external, gen pop is probably, very unbalanced, but, balance is, I believe, to the eye of the beholder, essentially. So, whatever you perceive as balance for you is balance for you. Nobody can tell you anything different. So, developed a little bit more balance in that aspect. And now, ever since then, I took 6 months off bodybuilding, did pure MMA, barely lifted weights. I was just doing stuff for mobility and things of that nature to just get better at jiu-jitsu. Eventually got a crazy injury in jiu-jitsu, which is not a crazy injury by any means, but I was already kind of transitioning, getting my interest back in bodybuilding and starting to get my love back again. And this is kind of the tipping point of me switching back into bodybuilding. Earlier this year is I got an injury where I was rolling around with somebody in jiu-jitsu practice, and my eye grazed against his gi, and I got this crazy, infection in my eye. It was just super nasty to where like this entire eye was like swollen shut. And I'm a side sleeper, so when I was sleeping on my side, I guess whatever, not to get nasty or TMI, but wherever gunk or goo in this eye just kind of traveled to the other eye, and both my eyes were swollen shut for an entire week. And I'm a guy, single, live by myself in my apartment, and I couldn't see for an entire week, and I own a business by myself. That was where I was like, I love MMA, I love jujitsu, but I did bodybuilding for 6 years, and I've never been in a position to where I couldn't take care of myself for an entire week. I was like, this is probably not the smartest choice for my business, because that's obviously my priority. I was having to literally message clients using the voice, text to voice thing, because I couldn't see my own phone in front of me. So that was kind of like a transition point for sure, or like the tipping point. But I was already getting back interested into bodybuilding. So kind of leads me to where I'm at currently in my journey, is just try and currently get back a little bit of my size, but also kind of take some of the lessons that I learned from jiu-jitsu and that break from bodybuilding to really kind of reinstate, my own perspective of what bodybuilding means to me truly.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up here. I have a work call, but this has been awesome, Tom. We'll definitely have to make a part 2 because there's a lot more I wanted to get to with you, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface. But thank you so much for coming on today. Thanks for sharing your story. Folks, if you haven't yet, please, please, please follow Tom on Instagram. It's Tom Schuster Fit. Posts a lot of amazing content, educational content. Follow the More Than Muscle podcast, Tom Schuster on YouTube. And thanks again for coming on today, Tom. Really appreciate it.
Always great talking with you, Scott. Hopefully we can do a part 2 on this channel. But yeah, guys,
Definitely.
Scott is the absolute man on the podcast and off the podcast. He's honestly been one of my favorite people that I've gotten to connect with in the industry so far. So
Thank you.
He's the real deal, guys, for sure.
Feelings mutual. All right. Have a great day, Tom.
You as well.